What if I told you that the very system designed to protect wildlife might actually be one of the biggest reasons why reptiles and amphibians are disappearing? And here's the crazy part. Most people who love reptiles and amphibians may actually be locked out of helping to save them. I'm Jaron from the Sonoran Herping Adventures YouTube channel. This can be a touchy topic, and regardless on how you feel about it, feel free to leave a respectful comment. In this video, we're breaking down what is known as the public trust doctrine, what it is, where it came from, how it works today, and why it just might be failing the very animals that we care about the most. And by the end of this video, I'll show you a path forward that could completely change reptile conservation forever. Right now, around the globe, we're watching populations of reptiles and amphibians decline due to habitat loss, drought, invasive species, and disease. But unfortunately, the main strategy that wildlife agencies have is to stop you from catching them. Let's talk about why. At its core, the public trust doctrine is a simple idea. The idea is that wildlife doesn't belong to individuals. Rather, it belongs to everyone. And the government or the wildlife agencies? Well, they're just the trustee who manages the wildlife on behalf of the public. That means that you don't own wildlife, even if it's on your own land. Instead, the state holds it in trust, and it's supposed to be managed for the benefit of all people. This is actually why you need licenses to hunt and to fish. And it's the very reason that wildlife agencies even exist at all. So, where did this idea come from? Actually, this concept goes all the way back to the times of ancient Rome. Under ancient Roman law, certain things like air, water, and wildlife were considered resources that were common to all people. Later on, this idea carried forward into English law, where the king technically owned all of the wildlife, but was expected to manage it for the public. This didn't always work out so well, with the king often giving special access to wildlife to the privileged classes. Then, when the United States was formed, that authority shifted from the king to the states. Well, in fact, it actually works pretty well for most species, but unfortunately, it works poorly for many others. In the US, the public trust doctrine creates three different roles. First is the trustee. This is the state wildlife agency. These agencies manage the wildlife. The second are the beneficiaries. That's you, me, the public. We are the ones that are supposed to benefit from the wildlife. And third is the resource. This is the wildlife itself. Now here's where things get really interesting. Wildlife agencies are mostly funded by hunting licenses, fishing licenses, and taxes on things like guns and ammo. So because of the source of the funding for most wildlife agencies, which wildlife do you think gets the most attention? That's right, game species, deer, elk, ducks, fish, because those are the user groups that are paying the most into the system. But what about reptiles and amphibians? Well, unfortunately, their users barely contribute to the funding model at all, and therein lies the problem. Herpers, people like you and me, generally don't pay much into the system at all. There's generally not a widespread licensing structure. In many states, there's no major excise tax funding, and often no large revenue stream at all that's tied to reptiles and amphibians. So, what does that mean? It means that wildlife agencies have very limited funding for herp conservation. They have limited political pressure to prioritize them, and they have very limited tools and resources to work with to actually protect them. Because unfortunately, under the public trust doctrine, the primary tools of these wildlife agencies is to regulate harvest. They can limit collection, ban collection, and restrict access. But here's the problem. Harvest is not the main driver for decline in most species of reptiles and amphibians. The real threats usually are habitat destruction from urban development, water diversion and drought, climate change, and competition from invasive species like plants and animals. And guess what? Wildlife agencies have very little control over any of those things. So unfortunately, that puts us in a situation where we're really only protecting animals from people catching them, while doing almost nothing to stop the very things that are actually wiping them out. And here's where things get even more controversial. The public trust model often restricts private citizens from keeping native species, breeding them in captivity, and building stable captive populations. Instead, the idea is only to prevent the overexploitation of the animals from the wild. But there's an unintended consequence to this. We lose the ability to create genetic reservoirs. In other words, backup populations. An ark, so to speak, for species that are declining in the wild. Instead, we're often left painfully, slowly watching and observing populations crash in the wild, often with no safety net. But here's the thing, this isn't just theoretical. There are already examples of this very thing working. Private breeders, conservation groups, and organizations have already been able to maintain healthy captive populations, preserved rare genetics, and in some cases, even helped reintroduce species into the wild. Just think about what's possible when thousands of passionate keepers working alongside scientists and coordinating with wildlife agencies. That's massive capacity, way beyond the capacity of our current zoos and government agencies. So the question shouldn't be, should people be allowed to keep wildlife? The real question is, are we able to leave these other conservation options on the table because of an outdated system? The public trust doctrine was built in a very different time. And yes, for certain species it works incredibly well. But what about for reptiles and amphibians? It may actually be limiting our ability to actually save them. Who knows? Maybe the future looks like responsible private keeping, regulated captive breeding, and partnerships coordinating responsible keepers, scientists, and wildlife agencies. Because if we don't adapt, we might end up protecting the idea of wildlife while losing the animals themselves. If you care about reptiles and amphibians, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. I want to hear your respectful thoughts. Should private keepers in an organized fashion be allowed to play a larger role in conservation?